Sir, I need you to return to your seat immediately. Please, this is a restricted area. James Mitchell, 83 years old, with rough hands and light blue eyes, did not move. He stood at the door of the cockpit. His body was old but strong. He would not back down. The Boeing 787 shook hard. The whole plane shook in its metal bones. Screams came from the cabin. People were very scared. The flight attendant was a young man named Kyle. His hair was neat and perfect. His name tag said, "Lead Flight Attendant." He put his hand on James's arm. He tried to be strong and in charge, but his hand shook. "Sir, you do not understand how serious this is. We have a medical emergency. Both pilots are sick. You cannot be here." James kept looking past the attendant into the cockpit. He could see the co-pilot lying over the center console. The captain was leaning way back in his seat. His head was against the window. His chest was still. The plane was on autopilot for now, but it was flying blind, like an animal that couldn't see in a sky full of storms and other planes. "Is this some kind of joke?" Kyle asked. His voice cracked. He was desperate and scared. "Are you lost? Do you even know where you are, old man?" He saw a grandfather, someone's confused old relative who had walked toward the danger instead of away from it. He saw a problem. James finally turned his head just a little. His eyes were cloudy with age, but they were very calm and clear. In them, Kyle saw something scary. Not confusion, but absolute calm. James was thinking and watching carefully. "I know exactly where I am," James said. His voice was low and rough. Time had made it sound that way. "I'm at 34,000 feet in a $30 million airplane that is about to become a coffin for 164 people, unless someone flies it." He took a deep breath. The air was thin and cold. "Now, son, I think you should get out of my way." Kyle's face turned red. He felt angry and shocked. The old man's boldness was amazing. Kyle was the captain of the flight crew now. He was in charge. He was trained for this, for controlling crowds, for emergencies. Rule number 1 was to keep order and protect the cockpit. This old man was disorder. "Sir, I am the authority on this aircraft right now," Kyle said. He puffed out his chest. He tried to show confidence he didn't really feel. The plane dipped again, harder this time. A new wave of screams came from the cabin. "The last thing we need is a passenger trying to be a hero. We have called for help. The situation is under control." "Is it?" James asked. His voice was flat. He pointed with a small nod toward the control panel. "Your altitude has dropped 400 feet in the last 90 seconds. Your airspeed is going up and down. The autopilot is fighting weather it wasn't made for. The situation is not under control. It is a slow fall." Another flight attendant, a young woman named Sarah with wide, scared eyes, hurried up the aisle. "Kyle, what's going on? They're asking for an update. Air traffic control. They sound urgent." "Tell them we are handling it," Kyle said sharply, never taking his eyes off James. He felt a drop of sweat run down his face. He was losing control, not of the plane, but of the situation. This old man was fighting back, and in a metal tube in the sky, that was dangerous. "I asked if there was a pilot on board," Sarah whispered. Her voice was shaking. "He came forward," Kyle said with an ugly laugh. "Look at him. He probably flew old planes in the 1950s. This is a flying supercomputer. What could he possibly do? We need a current certified 707 pilot, not a museum piece." The insult hung in the air, sharp and mean. James didn't react. He seemed to absorb the words like they were nothing, just a puff of wind. His attention was somewhere else. He was thinking about 1,000 things from the quick look he'd had at the cockpit. He could hear the engines straining. He could feel the airplane shaking, the small changes in pressure. The plane was talking to him, and he was listening. "License," Kyle demanded. His hand was out. "If you are a pilot, you will have a license, a current one." Slowly, carefully, James reached into the pocket of his red leather jacket. He pulled out an old leather wallet. Its edges were soft from many years of use. He looked through it for a moment. His old fingers were not as quick as they used to be. Kyle watched, getting more impatient. His foot tapped fast on the carpeted floor. To him, this slow search was just more proof that the man was too old. It was a sad last try to seem important. He was wasting time. "Come on, Grandpa, we don't have all day," Kyle said. The words were mean. The clock is ticking. Yes, it is, James said. His voice was still very calm. He finally pulled out a small card. It was an FAA pilot's license. The photo was 20 years old. It showed a man with the same steady eyes but fewer wrinkles on his face. The expiration date was still good. Kyle grabbed it from his hand. He stared at it. His mind was racing. It was real. James Mitchell, private pilot, multi-engine certified. It wasn't a license for a big commercial jet, but it wasn't nothing. Still, the difference between a small private plane and a Boeing 757 was huge, like the difference between a go-kart and a freight train. This doesn't qualify you, Kyle said, shoving the card back at him. Not for this. You would be more dangerous than the autopilot. The autopilot is a tool, James said. His voice got harder for the first time. It follows orders. It cannot think on its own. It cannot feel the air up there. He nodded toward the dark gray clouds outside the cockpit window. You need to feel it. You need a pilot. The plane jerked violently, throwing Sarah against the wall. A loud crash came from the back as service carts fell over. The overhead bins shook and the emergency lights flickered on. They made the cabin look ghostly and scary. The autopilot warning alarm started blaring. It was a loud, sharp sound that cut through the chaos. The fall was no longer slow. It was getting worse. We are stalling, James's voice cut through the alarm like a knife. It was pure command. He pushed forward, no longer waiting for permission. Kyle, off balance and frozen by the sudden danger, stumbled back. James was in the cockpit. He moved fast even though he was old. His hand immediately went to the control wheel. His eyes scanned the flight display. He saw the critical warning. The airspeed was dropping. With a firm, steady push, he pushed the nose down. It seemed wrong, but it was right. It sent the plane into a controlled dive. The force pressed everyone into their seats. The stall warning stopped. It was replaced by the roar of the engines as they grabbed the air again. He had saved them for a moment, but they were still diving. Kyle scrambled back to his feet. He saw the altitude dropping fast like a broken clock. What are you doing? You're going to crash us. I'm flying the airplane, James said. His knuckles were white on the controls. Something your little box forgot how to do. He eased back on the wheel, slowly, carefully. He was coaxing the huge aircraft out of the dive. The nose came up. The horizon leveled out. The terrible fall stopped. The 777 was stable again, flying level. But now it was in the hands of an unknown, very old man. Kyle felt a new kind of fear. Not the fear of a crash, but the fear of the unknown. He had no rule book for this. There was no protocol. This man had just done something that needed huge skill and courage. Yet he looked like he should be in a retirement home. It didn't make sense. He looked at James, truly looked at him, and saw total confidence in his face, the focus in his eyes. It was the confidence of a man who knew this world of metal and air very well. He was at home here. James reached into his wallet again. His left hand never left the controls. He didn't look for his license this time. His fingers found a small hidden part of the wallet. As he pulled it open, a patch was there. It was sewn into the wallet. Its colors were faded. It showed a fox, thin and smart-looking. Its body looked like it was made from black carbon fiber. The background was a dark, starless sky. For a split second, the stale air of the cockpit seemed to disappear. In its place was the smell of jet fuel and wet jungle. An image flashed in his mind, a memory as sharp and clear as the day it happened. He was 25 years old. His face was covered in sweat and dirt. He was in the cockpit of his F-4 Phantom fighter jet. It was a hot, shaking cage. The night sky over North Vietnam was alive with fire. It was like a painting from hell. Red and green bullets crossed the darkness. An enemy MiG was chasing him, a hunter in the dark. He could hear his wingman's scared calls over the radio, the panicked breathing. But he was calm. He saw the patterns, the math of the fight. He rolled, pulled, and dove. He wasn't just flying the machine. He had become part of it. A ghost in the night, he disappeared from the MiG's radar. Then he appeared behind it, like a ghost bringing death. When he landed, his flight suit was soaked with sweat. His commander had put the new patch on his shoulder. "We're calling you the Shadow Eagle," the man had said, "because you're made of the night, untouchable." The memory was gone as fast as it came, but its power stayed. It reminded him of who he was under all the age and time. He was not just James Mitchell, old man in seat 14B. He was the Shadow Eagle. Sarah, the younger flight attendant, had calmed down. She saw the fragile stability James had created. She understood that Kyle's blocking was now the biggest threat to the airplane. He was still talking, arguing, trying to get his authority back. But it had disappeared the moment the stall warning had sounded. She had to do something. She grabbed the cockpit radio. It was used to talk to the cabin and, more importantly, the ground. Kyle shot her an angry look. "What are you doing? Put that down." She ignored him. Her fingers fumbled with the controls. She switched to the emergency channel. Her voice was strained and breathless. "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Transatlantic 721. We have total pilot incapacitation. The aircraft is currently under the control of a passenger, a volunteer pilot." The voice of the air traffic controller came back right away. It was sharp and professional, but tense. "Transatlantic 721, we copy your mayday. We are clearing all traffic near you. Can you identify the volunteer pilot? We need his name and qualifications. We need to know who is flying your plane." Kyle lunged for the radio, but Sarah turned her body, blocking it. "He's an old man. We don't know. He has a private license, but..." Before she could finish, James spoke. His eyes were still locked on the horizon. His voice was a low command that filled the small space. "Tell them. Tell them Shadow Eagle is on the stick." Sarah paused. She was confused but felt she should obey. The name meant nothing to her. It sounded like something from a kid's cartoon. "What, sir? They need your name." "The name won't mean anything to them," James said. His voice was flat. "The call sign will." There was absolute certainty in his voice. It was impossible to argue with. He was turning the plane gently, a long, slow turn to a new direction he had somehow figured out. He was not just keeping them from crashing. He was taking them somewhere. Hesitantly, Sarah pressed the button. "ATC, the volunteer pilot. He asked me to tell you his call sign. It's Shadow Eagle." There was a moment of silence on the radio. It stretched for 5 seconds, then 10. It felt like forever. Kyle let out a bitter laugh. "Shadow Eagle. See, he's crazy. We've given a plane full of people to a madman." But then the controller's voice came back. Every bit of professional calm was gone. It was replaced by something else. Pure shock. "Transatlantic 721. Say again that call sign. Did you say Sierra Hotel Alpha Delta, Oscar Whiskey, Echo Alpha Golf, Lima Echo?" "Affirmative," Sarah said. Her own voice was barely a whisper. "Shadow Eagle." The line went quiet again, but this time it was different. It was the silence of people rushing around doing many things at once. In the dimly lit, high-security command center of NORAD, deep inside Cheyenne Mountain, Air Force General Marcus Ironhawk nearly dropped his coffee. The message from the Denver ATC had been sent to him as normal procedure. Another civilian emergency to watch, but the call sign had hit him like a punch. "Get me a lock on that transponder now," he barked. His voice echoed through the huge room. A dozen people jumped into action. Their fingers flew across keyboards. A map of the western United States appeared on the main screen. A blinking red dot showed the location of Transatlantic 721. "General," a young lieutenant asked. His face was pale. "Is that call sign real?" "There's only one Shadow Eagle," Ironhawk said. His eyes were glued to the screen. "I thought he was dead, or at least gone, like all the other ghosts." He turned to his communications chief. "Get me the 49th Wing at Holloman. I want 2 F-35s in the air 5 minutes ago. I want them scrambled with a direct link to my console. Their mission is escort. Tell them who they are escorting. Use the call sign. They'll understand." He walked over to a secure computer and typed in a special code. He pulled up a file that was so old it had been copied from paper records. A black and white photo appeared on the screen. A young man with a confident grin and the same steady eyes James Mitchell still had. Below it, a service record that read like a story from a movie. Over 300 combat missions, a kill record that was still secret, recipient of the Air Force Cross, the Silver Star, a dozen other medals for bravery, and a final entry, retired Brigadier General James Shadow Eagle Mitchell. "Clear a flight path for him," Ironhawk commanded. His voice rang with authority that left no room for question. Move every civilian and military aircraft in a 200-mile radius. Give him the entire sky and get him a runway, the longest one we have. Tell Nellis to prepare for the arrival of a legend. Back on the 777, Kyle was reaching his breaking point. The strange talk with ATC, the old man's scary calm, the complete impossibility of the situation. It had all turned into a furious, desperate need to get control back. He saw James not as a savior, but as someone who had stolen the situation from him. "That's it. I've had enough," he announced. His voice was high and shrill. He turned to the other flight attendant, a big man who had been trying to calm passengers at the front of the cabin. "John, help me get him out of that seat. We're putting this plane back on autopilot, and we are going to follow standard procedure." James didn't even look at him. He was listening to something else, a faint crackling sound in his headset. "That would be a mistake," he said calmly. "The mistake was letting you in here," Kyle shot back, moving forward. He grabbed James's shoulder. His fingers dug into the thin fabric of his jacket. "I am ordering you as the ranking crew member of this flight to give up control. If you do not, I will have you held down, and you will be arrested for interfering with the flight crew the moment we land." "If we land." It was his final arrogant threat, the biggest overreach. He was so focused on the man, on the enemy he thought was in front of him, that he didn't see what Sarah saw. Her face was pressed against the cockpit window. Her mouth was open. "Kyle," she whispered, "look." Out of the dark gray clouds, two shapes came out with amazing speed and precision. They were not birds, not other airliners. They were sleek, angular, and scary-looking, the color of a storm cloud. Two F-35 Lightning II stealth fighters, the most advanced combat aircraft in the world, appeared as if from nowhere. One took up a position off the right wing, the other off the left. They were so close you could see the pilots in their futuristic helmets. Their forms were steady and calm inside their own bubbles of high-tech power. The arrival was not loud. It was a silent, overwhelming show of power and purpose. They weren't there to watch. They were there to serve. The radio, which James had switched to a military frequency, crackled to life. The voice that came through was young, professional, and filled with deep respect. "Shadow Eagle, this is Ghost Lead. We read you 5 by 5. We have you, and we are your escort. The sky is yours, sir. Just tell us where you want to go." Kyle froze. His hand was still on James's shoulder. He heard the call. He heard the name. He looked from the F-35 hanging impossibly still just a few hundred feet away to the old man in the pilot's seat. The pieces clicked into place like a physical shock. His rudeness, his arrogance, his entire view of the last 30 minutes broke into a million pieces. His face went white as chalk. He slowly, carefully removed his hand from James Mitchell's shoulder. James pressed the mic button. His thumb moved with familiar ease. "Ghost Lead, this is Shadow Eagle. Good to see you, boys. Let's head for Nellis. I've got a plane full of people who would like to be on the ground." "Roger that, Eagle. We'll show you the way home," the pilot replied. Sarah, her eyes shining with tears of relief and wonder, took the cabin radio. Her voice, when she spoke to the passengers, was no longer shaking with fear, but with a deep sense of wonder. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you look out your windows, you will see that we are being escorted by two F-35 fighters from the United States Air Force. The gentleman flying our plane, they know him. They are here for him. Everything is going to be okay." A murmur went through the cabin. Then one by one, passengers leaned over to look out the windows. The sight of the fighter jets, symbols of ultimate skill and power, acted like a calming medicine on their frayed nerves. The panic that had held them for so long finally began to go away. It was replaced by a stunned, disbelieving silence. They weren't on a falling plane anymore. They were part of a rescue, an event of huge importance. The old man in the cockpit was not a random passenger. He was someone important, a figure of hidden greatness. The power of the entire flight had been completely flipped, not just in the cockpit, but in the minds of everyone on board. The landing at Nellis Air Force Base was perfect. James handled the huge Boeing 777 with the gentle touch of a surgeon. The plane kissed the runway so softly that the touchdown was hardly anything at all. As the plane rolled toward a waiting group of emergency vehicles and military people, a hush fell over the cabin. The flight was over. The ordeal was done. Before the jet bridge could even connect, the cabin door was opened from the outside. A group of Air Force officers stood there, but they did not board. They parted, and a single man in a general's uniform walked up the steps. It was General Ironhawk. He walked through the galley. His eyes scanned the scene until they landed on James, who was calmly going through the shutdown checklist as if he had done it 1,000 times. Ironhawk stopped at the cockpit door. He did not speak. He simply brought his hand up in a salute so sharp and precise it seemed to cut the air. "General Mitchell," he said. His voice was thick with emotion. "It is an honor, sir." James finished his checklist, then slowly unbuckled himself. He rose from the pilot's seat. His movements were stiff with age. He returned the salute with a tired but steady hand. "Good to be back on the ground, Marcus." Ironhawk's gaze then fell upon Kyle, who was standing frozen against the galley wall. His face was a mask of shame and disbelief. The general's expression turned to ice. "You," he said. His voice was low and dangerous. "I have the full recording from the flight. Your conduct was an obstruction. You actively stopped a decorated officer and a national hero from saving the lives of everyone on this plane. Your career in aviation is over." The words were a death sentence, and Kyle visibly crumpled. But before the weight of them could fully crush him, James held up a hand. "Easy, Marcus," he said. His voice was gentle. The boy was following his training. He was scared. Fear makes people hold on to the rules they know, even when the rules don't work anymore. He turned to Kyle, and his eyes held no anger, only a deep, tired understanding. "The lesson here isn't to punish a man for his fear. It's to write better rules. To create a system that allows for the unexpected, that trusts in experience over a job title." James then reached up and touched the chest of his leather jacket, right over his heart. As his fingers brushed the fabric, another memory surfaced, another echo. He was a young lieutenant, fresh out of flight school, being handed his first official flight jacket by his commanding officer. The leather was stiff and new. The CO pointed to the empty patch on the chest. "That's where your story goes," he'd said. "Every pilot has a name, but the sky gives you a title. Go earn it." He remembered the first time he'd heard the name Shadow Eagle whispered in a briefing room. A name born in the fire and darkness of combat. A name that meant survival, skill, and something more. An unseen, untouchable presence when things were at their worst. That name was his story. A few weeks later, the news briefly talked about the hero pilot of Transatlantic 721. The airline announced the immediate start of the Mitchell Protocol, a new set of emergency procedures for finding and helping qualified volunteer pilots in a crisis. It was a small change, a footnote in the huge manual of aviation rules, but it was a legacy. One quiet Tuesday morning, James was sitting at his usual table in the local VFW hall, nursing a cup of black coffee. The door opened and Kyle walked in. He was no longer in his crisp flight attendant uniform. He wore simple jeans and a sweater, and he looked smaller, younger. He walked over to James's table and stood there for a long moment, his hands stuffed in his pockets. He didn't offer a long apology or a rambling explanation. He just looked at the old man who had saved his life and 163 others. "Thank you," he said, his voice quiet and sincere. He placed a fresh, steaming cup of coffee on the table in front of James. "Sir." James looked up from his cup, his pale blue eyes meeting Kyle's. He didn't smile, but a warmth entered his expression. He simply gave a slow, deliberate nod. It was an acceptance, a dismissal, a lesson learned on both sides. The quiet moment was more meaningful than any public ceremony or medal could ever be. It was a small act of grace, a final peaceful landing after a lifetime of turbulence. Thank you for watching this story of valor. If you were moved by the courage and wisdom of General James Mitchell, the Shadow Eagle, please hit the like button, share this video with others, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories of unassuming heroes.